Chapter 1 Wish of Immortality. Somewhere on Earth, inside a spacious room full of high-tech medical equipment. Right in the center of this room was a high-tech hospital cot with all kinds of pharmaceutical machines attached to it, and on this comfortable cot lay a bony old man, full of wrinkles. He was faintly breathing with the help of a ventilator. With extreme difficulty, the old man opened his trembling eyelids, revealing a pair of murky pupils. The old man aimlessly stares at the white ceiling in a daze, like he is deep in thought, or he is just exhausted. Sigh. I can't even remember how long I've been in this white room. A day? A year? A decade? I just remembered my fear of death and then, sigh. I only had a vague memory of using my colossal wealth and influence to create this room so that I could live as long as possible. But living like this is not living at all. I can only breathe and sleep. I can't enjoy food or even water anymore. No woman, drinks, walk, talk, nothing. Friends. Yes, my friends. Are they still alive? I can't even remember their faces or names. Only Liam rings a bell, but I can't remember anything. Family. Yes, I remember my wife died a year before I decided to create this room. After that, everything is foggy. I remember having sons, but why didn't they come to see me anymore? Well, I hope they're happy. I left enough for them to live like emperors. It would be good if I could see their faces before I met my end, though. Why do we have to die, eventually? Can't we just live forever with our loved ones? Why are our lives so fragile and cheap? Why were we born if we had to die in the first place? No matter how much we achieve, how much wealth we accumulate, power, status, love, betrayal, worldly pleasures, everything will eventually end with old age, and finally, we enter the embrace of death. Nothing mattered in the end. Our brief journey called life will eventually end without reaching anywhere. We can either pave the way for others who come after us or do the complete opposite by doing nothing. People will replace people. Fresh memories will be made while old ones will be turned into histories. Nothing can last forever, so live to the fullest while it lasts. But if you ask a dying person's last wish, I don't know about others, but I want to live another day and don't want to die, period. Just like all those fantasies, I want to become immortal. And after experiencing the harsh reality of old age and being left alone to rot in this room while constantly living in fear of dying in the next second, I'll give up anything for it. Anything. The silent plunge. But suddenly the old man noticed something strange. Wait, a moment. Why is my brain not hurting anymore? Why don't I feel sleepy anymore because of all those medicines? Before, I couldn't even awake for probably 5 minutes, and whenever I thought, my brain started to hurt, but it didn't happen this time. But, oh, my memories are becoming more evident all of a sudden. My name is Jacob Steve. But how is it even possible? Did those scientists discover some miracle drug and my son bought it for me? So, those bastards didn't forget about their old man after all, heh? Blood is indeed thicker than water. But why is everything dark? Did this drug only work on my brain but not my eyes? Sigh. It's still far better than my previous state though. But I still have to die in the end. If not today, then tomorrow. At this moment, Jacob heard a foreign husky voice for the first time in quite a while. Very interesting. The experiment wasn't a total failure after all. This test subject's new heart started beating after 10 seconds of transplant. Jacob was astonished when he heard this husky mumbling because this language was completely new and foreign, but he could understand it like it was his mother tongue. As far as he could remember, he had never learned this type of language before. He was even more puzzled about what he had just heard though. So, they are now experimenting on me. Which bastard permitted them to treat this old man's body as a lab rat? Was it William or Ryan? Little Zane would never do this to me. Jacob fumed as he cursed his sons. These bastards even dare to change my heart without even my consideration. Damn it, just which quack is it? If I regain my consciousness, you're dead, quack. However, the following words of this same husky voice completely gobsmacked Jacob. I got this human slave at a low price, but he seemed quite resilient for being a human, and he even survived that kind of transplant. Truly a rare specimen for being a human. Jacob suddenly felt. No, he knew something was freaking wrong with this quack. Is he a mad quack? He's talking about enslaved people and humans like he's living in some fantasy. Just what kind of nut job those bastards hand me over to. Soon, Jacob felt his body again and tried to open his eyes with all this power because he wanted this nut job out of his room as quickly as possible before he really killed him. Although he thought that being dead was better than living and all, he still didn't want to die when it came to it. He wasn't ready and probably never would be. He just wanted to take every breath before his body gave up on its own and no more machines or medicine worked on him. Yet, when Jacob's eyelids were finally opened, he was astonished and in disbelief because he could see clearly, unlike before when everything was cloudy. He could see as clearly as when he was in his prime, or even more clearly. Maybe this wasn't a quack after. However, his joy didn't last long as his eyes went wide in horror because he saw his entire torso was opened like doors, and one could see every organ and blood vein clearly. Ah! Jacob shrieked at the top of his lungs before his eyes rolled upward, and he lost consciousness. So, this was Jacob Steve, an old man who died at age 116. After living on machines and medicines for 20 years, his heart finally couldn't take it and fail. Jacob didn't feel a thing because of the potent anesthetics in his system and was unknowingly reincarnated. As for his first experience in this mysterious place, he only woke up for 5 seconds before witnessing his own post-mortem, and losing consciousness because of utter pain, shock, and horror. Even if Jacob had the mentality of a century-old man and had seen pretty much everything in his past life, this was still hard to swallow. Jacob still doesn't know. It was just the start of his suffering and his undesirable, brutal journey toward the immortality he wanted so badly. Chapter 2 Reality Check. After an unknown time, Jacob opened his eyes again in confusion before memories of recent events came back in mass. At first, he thought it was just a horrible dream, but when he felt his body and saw with his new clear vision again, his heartbeat instantly shot up like a rocket. He subconsciously looked toward this torso again, but his head won't move for some reason, so he used his eyes and felt relieved when he saw it wasn't open like a book anymore. But his relief was momentary when he noticed the strangeness surrounding him. First, he was completely naked and couldn't speak or move for some reason. Second, he felt pretty new, not like he remembered the old feeling. Third, he can't move his hands or feet, not even his pinky. Last but not least, and most scary, he was floating inside a glass cell filled with light blue liquid. He could only vaguely see his reflection, but not so clearly. Just what the hell is going on? Perplexed, Jacob tried to look through the transparent glass. The outside was lit with soft green light. Jacob could vaguely see a table in the center of the room. When Jacob's eyes landed on the wall right in front of his glass cell, he was shocked, and his eyes trembled in horror. There was some glass cell on the wall in front, but inside it was a creature with the head of a wild pig and the torso of a human male. I must be hallucinating. There is no damn way that thing is real. Jacob denied it wholeheartedly, without even thinking twice. He quickly shifted his focus elsewhere since he didn't want to look there again, afraid he might hallucinate. Jacob spotted small stairs going upward at the corner of the room, which was clearly a way out of his view. But he couldn't get free from whatever was holding him, no matter how much he tried, nor could he feel any kind of restraint, chains, or lock. Jacob finally gave up thinking he was indefinitely hallucinating or dreaming, as matter-of-factly, because it was impossible to become young and magically appear in this horrible place. He was never a believer in any cult or religion. He never believed in reincarnation despite his desire for immortality. He just thought of it as a fantasy and unachievable wish which probably every living being had. Nothing less, nothing more. Sigh. I'm probably about to die or already dead, and this might be one of those flashbacks before death. But why is mine like a horror movie? Jacob was perplexed. Well, it'll soon be over, and I'll cease to exist after that. Jacob lamented with a hint of unwillingness and deep sadness. Right then, Jacob heard the creaking sound of a door being opened. With squinting eyes, he looked toward those vague stairs. A trim, vague silhouette clad in a black cape entered the room. Jacob could tell this person's height was close to 4 feet. That was clearly uncommon unless this person was a child. The little silhouette took off the cape and threw it toward a little table near the stairs. Jacob still couldn't clearly see the person's face. But he didn't care since he was going to die very soon. The little silhouette suddenly noticed Jacob's glass cell and moved toward it. Jacob coolly watched this person coming closer and closer. "Oh, you're awake." This person somehow noticed Jacob's opened eyes. Furthermore, his voice was exactly the same one Jacob had heard before he startled awake last time. "Sigh, why is this quack in my flashback? I never seem to offend any doctor psychopath in my life," Jacob sighed bitterly. The little person suddenly extended his finger toward something beside Jacob's glass cell, and all the blue liquid sank toward the bottom while the glass cell holding Jacob slowly became empty. Jacob could finally see somewhat clearly when the blue, slimy liquid was gone. He could tell he was standing on the metallic surface, but he still couldn't move his face or anything, as a matter of fact. Suddenly, the glass tube also started to slide downward. It was clearly opening. Now Jacob's eyes finally landed on the tiny figure, and the moment it happened, his entire body shuddered as his eyes contracted with horror. The little person's face was utterly brown, with a 5 centimeters long knife-like nose, a pair of green eyeballs and black pupils, long pointy ears, and sharp, sinister greenish fangs showing through its mouth. It was completely bald, with only a strand of black hair right in the center of its head. Jacob wanted to swear, but his damn mouth just refused to open. His death flashback was becoming more and more accurate and ghastly. "I don't like the way how you look at me, slave." The little monster snorted coldly as his greenish eyes shimmered mysteriously. "Kneel." Jacob, who was still thinking this was just a horror show before his death, finally felt something that one could not have felt if they were dead or dreaming. Pain. When the word kneel came out of the little monster's mouth, Jacob felt intense pain in his brain before his whole body trembled and his knees bent without his control or will. Bang! A loud sound of bones hitting the hard steel resounded in the room. Jacob's feelings changed between bewilderment, horror, disbelief, and intense pain in his knees. His kneecaps were nearly shattered when his body kneeled without his concern. Now, that's better. A slave should always act like this. The little monster sneered when he saw Jacob's body shaking, and his face turned pale, which was still expressionless. Jacob somehow snapped out of his stupor, and all those moments flashed past his eyes. Foreign language, his sudden bloody awakening, then being in that glass cell in that slimy blue liquid, and finally mysteriously forced to kneel by this strange talking monster. Everything pointed out in one direction that he had never believed in his life before, but all this thing was forcing him to think about it, and it was probably the only answer to his billions of questions. R.E.R. Reincarnation. Chapter 3 Bloodstorming Bug. I re-reincarnated. Right now, Jacob's mind was struck by lightning and turned into a mess. Everything was happening too fast for him to process, and his recent experiences after his transmigration made things more complicated. Jacob read transmigration genre novels and shows in his old days, but he always sneered since this was nothing but fantasy in his eyes. Besides, he never had much time for all these side activities, and only after retiring did he enjoy some movies and books. But now, these fantasies have become absolute reality, and it doesn't seem pretty either. According to this little monster, he was enslaved, and this little ugly thing was his master. Furthermore, this little monster can somehow control his every action. Just his disability of not being able to move was solid proof of it. Hell, he can't even speak. Calm down, Jacob. You are someone who conquered the world's entire weaponry industry, so conquering his little monster should be a piece of cake for you. Furthermore, look at the bright side. You gain another life. Jacob somehow calmed himself, but he was only collected on the surface while his heart was on the verge of exploding. Even though he was elated when he thought about his second life, his peculiar situation didn't seem quite optimal for his little second life. I need more information, but how? I can't even speak. And this little brown bastard didn't seem friendly at all. Jacob fearfully looked at the little monster, who was coldly staring at him with greenish eyes. Now that you're disciplined, let's see the result of the first transplant. The little monster's ugly face suddenly turned excited when he mentioned the first transplant. Go lay down on the table straight, he ordered Jacob while he went toward all those strange tools resting on a large rusty steel tray connected to the old steel table. Those tools also seemed quite worn out. Jacob stood up like an obedient dog and did as he was told. He lay down on the steel table, which was only a little longer than his height, with an expressionless face. Damn it, the feeling of being controlled is not good in the slightest, especially when you are controlled by an ugly monster, not by a pretty woman. Just how is he controlling me? Jacob had never felt so helpless in his entire life. He finally understood just how much control that little monster had over him. He even suspected if that thing wanted him to commit suicide, his body wouldn't even hesitate to slit his own throat. The little monster picked up a scalpel-like tool, but it was more like a portable knife. After that, he made a deep 2-centimeter cut right below the center of Jacob's chest. Blood started to gush out, but the little monster didn't seem to care. Then he took a long metallic tube with both sides open like a metal pipe and stabbed it in the cut, and Jason's body trembled slightly. Fuck you, bastard. At least use some anesthesia, and are those things even sterilized? Jason was swearing in pain and concern as he felt the metal tube going deeper inside the cut. After the little monster was satisfied with the metal tube placement, he opened the cover of the small red bag hanging around his neck. From inside, he took out a small green vial. Jacob was gawking at the little green vial with pain, and he suddenly had a terrible feeling about this, and just as he suspected, the little monster opened the lid and picked up a tweezer from the tray. The tweezer slowly entered the vial and started to rise. Jacob was seeing this scene in slow motion. He knew whatever was going to reveal. He won't like it in the least bit. Suddenly, Jacob's pupils dilated in horror as his body started to shiver subconsciously. The tweezer was holding a strange gray bug when it exited from the green vial, which was 0.5 centimeter in size. The little monster seemed to like Jacob's reaction, as he wore a sinister smile. He waved the tweezer holding the gray bug at Jacob and said, "This is a blood-storming bug. Don't worry. It won't create a storm inside your body, but the moment it enters someone's bloodstream, it goes straight toward the heart and forces its host's blood to circulate quickly. The fascinating thing about this blood-storming bug is it can circulate blood at the speed of lightning, but it was just a theory since no one survives that long, even to this day. Furthermore, you know what its fuel or its food is." The little monster wore an extremely sinister smile as he answered his own question. "It feeds on its host's heart." Jacob's body quivered even more as blood trickled all over his chest from the cut. What the fuck is he trying to do with that sinister bug? After hearing the explanation, Jacob wanted to fight this brown fuck to death. However, he has no doubt this little bastard was not saying all this to intimidate him. That ugly sadistic smile was enough to tell he was speaking the absolute truth. "Now I'm going to send this bug toward one of your major heart veins with this tube, and if my last transplant was a success, then you don't need to worry. This bug would instantly crawl back, and if it wasn't a success, then, sigh. I have to find a new test subject. Number 226. Or was it 229? What a hassle." The little monster sighed helplessly when discussing the hassle of finding a new slave. He clearly didn't care about Jacob at all. 2-2-2. 226. Just how many people has he killed before? It's over for me. 2 steam tears flowed from Jacob's eyes as they became immediately listless just thinking about the death toll. He never thought he would somehow reincarnate and meet with this brown devil. Now, he was about to die again, and he wondered if he would get another chance again at life like this. At this moment, The little monster finally dropped the blood-storming bug inside the metal tube with deep anticipation in his cold green eyes. Jacob's listless eyes suddenly opened wide as his entire eyeballs became visible, and blood covered his white eyeballs. He felt something drilling into his bones, as the sensation alone made him wish he were dead. Chapter 4 Survived. Jacob's entire body was shaking as cracking sounds came from his hands and feet because they were in the same position. After all, some mysterious power was holding them in one place, which goes against the nature of the human body. Blood started to trickle from Jacob's orifice after 10 seconds, especially from his eye sockets. The little monster coldly looked at the metal tube, completely ignoring Jacob's condition, as his only concern was the reaction of blood-storming bug. This little monster's name was Decker, and he was an imp goblin. He has killed many people in the same type of experiments, and none of them was human before. Most of his experiment subjects died in the first phase of transplants, which was to change the heart of a living being with another one. Only 12 experiment subjects were made in the testing phase, and Jacob was one of them. Unfortunately, no one survived this phase because blood-storming bugs always ate their new hearts and caused them a painful and gruesome death. Truth be told, Decker only bought Jacob out of curiosity and desperation. Furthermore, he was cheap and had never experimented on a human before. Decker wanted this experiment to be successful because there was too much at stake for him, even his insignificant life. As he watches Jacob reacting in the same way as the other subjects and almost on the verge of exploding, he shakes his head in disappointment. He knew this one was also a lost cause. Because if the first transplant was successful, then the blood-storming bug was supposed to leave Jacob's body in 20 seconds, and 15 seconds were already passed. The longest someone survived from blood-storming bug was 30 seconds, and if the person hosted by a blood-storming bug didn't take the cure to kill the bug between this time, they're doomed. Please, just kill me. Jacob only had this thought in mind at this moment as he felt his heart stabbed with small knives every second. He never would have dreamed he would be transmigrated as a slave of some sadistic psycho and die in this torturous manner. With deep resentment and pain, he felt his previous life was too good. Even though he lived for a short 100 years, he still lived like an emperor after success in the business world. At least that world had rules and laws. Most importantly, only humans were the dominating species, and they controlled everything. But here, everything was too strange. This monster could control him with thoughts, and these peculiar bug creatures also seemed too normal here. Jacob felt his consciousness fading away slowly as the pain started to lessen bit by bit. He felt immense relief at finally being free from this pain and this strange world, which he didn't even get the chance to see. No more. Jacob's consciousness descent into darkness. Decker saw Jacob's body stop moving, his breathing almost non-existent, and his discontent grew. Did I do all that for nothing? Is this journal even real? Decker mumbled in depression. Sigh. I think it's all happening because all those test subjects were from mere low races, and I need to find a new powerful slave from a superior race to become completely insured. But those races are too protective of their kin, and those slave traders don't dare to extend their hands toward them. Decker mused as his face shone with desperation. He just refused to believe this journal was just a hoax. After a while, Decker snapped out of his thoughts and looked toward Jacob, and his depressed expression suddenly turned into a shocked one. With disbelief written all over his ugly face, he flashed his little brown finger under Jacob's bloody nose. What? Decker couldn't help but shout out loud when he felt Jacob's warm, faint breath. He survived? But where is blood-storming bug, then? My connection with it also cut off without me being noticed. So what the hell is going on? Decker's eyes shone with ecstasy as he hastened toward the metal tube, pulled it out from Jason, and threw it in a water tray. He quickly opened a small pocket of his bag hanging around his neck, took out a small dark yellow round pill, and opened Jacob's mouth before throwing it inside. The tiny tablet instantly dissolved in his throat. Decker didn't stop there and hastily picked up a knife-like scalpel and started to cut out his left chest without caring that Jacob might die from blood loss. Hell, it was already a miracle he was breathing right now. However, Jacob's breath became steady after Decker fed him the mysterious pill. Decker paid little attention, as if he expected this to happen, and opened his left breast until he reached the sternum, where he could see his slowly beating heart. If Jacob saw his heart, he would be shocked silly because it wasn't red but completely blue. Decker was stunned when he saw a perfect, beating heart. But then, excitement shone on his face. It seemed the blood-storming bug died and did not survive like it was supposed to. He reached an astonishing conclusion. It was entirely out of his expectation. Because the blood-storming bug can't be killed without a particular poison, and it was the first time he even witnessed it. Decker inhaled sharply as he mumbled with ecstasy. So that journal is even more potent than I thought. Ha ha ha, truly worth the risk. But I had to do 2 more major transplants with other substitute organs before trying it on myself. However, finding the organs described in the journal is almost impossible, but I can always find the second or third best for myself. I won't be using Hound Rat's heart like this human. Decker excitedly looked toward the unconscious Jacob, who was covered in his blood with sparkling eyes as if he was gawking at the priceless treasure. Since you're still valuable to me, I'll allow you to heal in green healing liquid this time. Decker shouted, Pighead, come and place this human in the healing cell again and use the green liquid this time. The monster with a wild boar head and human torso, inside another giant glass cell very close to Jacob's, suddenly trembled as its eyes snapped open and beastly pupils revealed. Hondralixtip. You can use left, right, A and D keyboard keys to browse between chapters. Chapter 5 Resolve to Live. Jacob groaned in pain as his tightly shut eyelids trembled slightly and slowly opened. I'm alive, he thought with incredulity as his eyeballs moved. The sheen in his eyes dimmed slightly when he noticed the same bleak surrounding, and the only difference was that he was floating in a yellowish slimy liquid, this time not blue. The only relief was the hellish pain he felt before losing consciousness was gone. How am I even breathing in this liquid? No, wait, I'm not breathing at all, but I'm still alive. He finally noticed this strangeness because there wasn't any kind of oxygen mask or anything that could help him breathe, but he was still alive. He could tell by his steady heartbeat. What a strange, cruel place, Jacob thought bitterly while vividly remembering his previous experience. Decker was no longer seen in the room, which meant he was out, which gave him some comfort, but he knew this wouldn't last long because once that brown devil came back and saw him awake, he would indefinitely start some other hellish experiment on him. Just thinking about the pain caused by blood-storming bug gave Jacob chills. I have to think of a way to escape this place somehow, but it's impossible unless I can move my body, Jacob mused gravely. He wasn't sure if he would remain sane if he experienced that kind of torturous pain again or how much longer he could take it. That evil bastard was talking about some transplants, and he changes my heart first. Furthermore, I survived the bug test, and according to the bastard, the transplant was successful. He also mentioned killing over 200 subjects, which means I'm probably the only one who survived to this point, making me even more precious. After all, if someone is this persistent in one experiment and doesn't give up even after over 200 tries, either this experiment holds too great of importance, or the person is a sick bastard who gets kicked out of others' misery. That evil bastard is definitely the latter, but the desperation was deeply hidden in his words, and my recovery made me the first one. So now I have to observe and find what this bastard wanted so badly from these experiments. Since he likes obedience and is probably a control freak, I might as well act as he wants, and he might let his guard down. But, unfortunately, he wanted to break my spirit, so I just had to act like a listless slave who completely submitted to his tragic fate from now on. Jacob's dimmed eyes suddenly turned cold as a hint of sharpness flashed past them. He wasn't some youngster who didn't have the experience of life. He lived a whole life and dealt with all kinds of people, primarily ruthless ones who hide behind a polite smile because of his weaponry business empire. Although he never killed anyone despite being a weapon dealer, the people who died from the weapons his company manufactured were countless, and he never ran from this responsibility. But his previous world was based on money, and without it, you're nothing, so he just decided to enjoy his life and rot in the afterlife, if there were any. However, now that he finally died and even reincarnated in this situation. He lamented if this was the retribution for his sins, which he had never committed by himself. But he won't just be going to stay helpless when he could change his fate, and he just needed to grab the opportunity the moment it came. Jacob closed his eyes after strengthening his resolve to leave this place alive. After an unknown time, the sound of an opening door rang in the silent room. Jacob's shut eyelids suddenly trembled, but he didn't open them and remained static. Decker was back with a big metal container in his hands and an excited smile on his ugly face. Still didn't wake up after 5 days. Decker's displeased voice entered Jacob's ear, and he remained static. However, his heartbeat wasn't as calm as his body. Your heartbeat is not with you in this act, I suppose. Decker sneered mockingly. If you keep pretending, I'll use 2 bloodstorming bugs this time. Is this evil bastard's ears that good? Jacob's heart turned cold, and he realized one of the significant flaws in his plan. He wasn't dealing with humans. Jacob didn't dare to antagonize this little devil anymore and quickly opened his eyes, but he still acted listless and fearful, which he actually was. Good, don't play any more games. You are destined to lose. But if you act obediently, I'll give you something for your pain from now on. Decker's voice sounded sincere. But Jacob wasn't the one to believe him. He really needed me for whatever experiment he's doing. So he quickly hides his joy and only acts statically. Decker was a little astonished when he saw Jacob's eyes remain listless even after his generous offer and thought, is he broke already? Well, what could you expect from a human? Just inflict a little pain, and they would sing their entire life story in front of you. But the pain inflicted by bloodstorming bug, rumored to be worse than 10 deaths, he survived and only lost his mind was a miracle on its own. So, why did he pretend to be unconscious before? Instinct or fear toward me? Whatever, as long as he lived through the 3rd implantation. Decker again pressed something, and after the yellowish liquid was sunk somewhere below, the old glass cell slid open, revealing naked Jacob. He had a bony body and face. He was the prime example of only skin and bones. It was as if he hadn't eaten for months, and his yellowish skin made him look highly sickly. He had shaved head, and his amber eyes were listless. His age was probably around 21 to 24, and his height was an average 1.6 meter. Even Jacob was shocked by his current condition when he vaguely saw his reflection in the transparent glass. Even when he was 96, he looked much healthier than this. Chapter 6 Blood from. Jacob does his best not to move his eyeballs and keeps staring into the void like an idiot. Decker didn't even try to see if Jacob was turned into a vegetable or if he was acting. He didn't care because, in his mind, Jacob was just a test subject and slave who he could kill with just thought whenever he felt like it. However, he won't do it now because he still needs his body for further experiments and his bright future. Go, lay down in your usual position. Decker coolly uttered while he began to arrange strange equipment and other things on a table, and put the large metal container in the center of the table. Jacob's eyes spasmed when he saw all those small tubes and long needles neatly arranged beside that large metal container. He very much wanted to run, but he knew this little devil wouldn't let him, nor he can move with his free will because of some mysterious power holding him in check. All he could do was remain calm and brace himself for whatever Decker had stored for him in that metal container. Since the first transplant was a complete success, it's time to move on to the second. Although it was written to wait 3 months before starting the second transplant, I think you're completely ready, don't you? Decker showed his sharp yellow teeth with his wintry smile. Jacob flinched a little while, doing his best to stare into the void as if he didn't hear anything. But his heart was on the verge of explosion because of what just Decker revealed. Although you can control your eyes quite well, you still have a long way to go if you want to control your nerves. Well, I don't mind since it doesn't matter because you can't do anything to me. Decker coldly sneered. Jacob could only sigh silently because he knew this guy wasn't a human, and he had far higher senses than humans, so it was meaningless to fool him with his chaotic emotions and without complete control over his heartbeat. However, He remained vacant and didn't do anything. He just lay there and waited for the pain. As long as you understand, I guess. Decker didn't mind Jacob's lack of reaction, and he picked 8-inch needle, which was hollow from the inside. He penetrated that long needle into Jacob's left arm. It was connected to a small glass tube, and thereby, red blood flowed from the other side of the tube and started streaming into a bucket right below. Jacob's body was frail to begin with, and the moment his blood started to flow out of his body, he began to become dazed. Decker quickly took a small blue pill he had arranged beforehand on the table, and placed it in Jacob's mouth without concern. Jacob suddenly felt the dazedness start to reduce, but the feeling of remaining empty was still there as his heart rate started to increase so that it could regenerate the lost blood. However, it was useless since the blood flow was faster than the meager regeneration. Decker scrutinized Jacob's condition, and when he saw his complexion was becoming paler and the blood flow from the needle also slowed down, his eyes flashed with excitement for some reason. Let's begin the second transplant written in that journal, the blood change. Although I don't know just which beast this blood belongs to since I collected this blood from a newly formed puddle, it's still vigorous and far more potent than human blood. I guess this was my luck since I don't have to spend any money on buying blood now. You have no idea. Just finding the auxiliary materials almost cost me 1/10 of my fortune. If you die now, I'll be very disappointed. Decker complained while bemoaning this wealth. Jacob nearly had a seizure when he thought this little devil was about to change his blood with something he had collected from a freaking puddle. This bastard definitely wanted me dead. Jacob really thought he was dead this time around. He wasn't ignorant when it came to medication. He had studied many old and modern medicines to prolong his life in the latter years of his life. Although with his deep contacts, he managed to acquire all those machines and drugs that could keep him alive, he still ended up dead. The only good thing about all this was he didn't feel any pain. Anyhow, he knew changing one's blood wasn't some child's play, and it always left with many hidden side effects, nor it can be done on a fucking whim. Furthermore, this fucker didn't even care about his blood type or origin. He just wanted to pump that puddle shit into his body without caring for viruses and bacteria. Decker was utterly clueless about Jacob's thoughts. Even if he knew what Jacob was thinking, he wouldn't pay attention since he knew what he was doing, and the only thing that mattered to him was the results. Jacob's life and death had nothing to do with him. Decker opened the square container, and a potent, nasty smell suddenly wrapped the entire room. Jacob wanted to puke at this moment. Because of his wealth and status in his previous life, he lived the life of an emperor. Just when was the last time he contacted this kind of nasty smell? He doesn't remember, honestly. Nevertheless, his little bit of hope for survival instantly shattered with this nasty smell. He knew there wasn't any way he could survive if this smelly thing entered his body. On the other hand, Decker seemed utterly unfazed by this smell, as if he was used to it. He picked up a small sealed flask and opened and turned it upside down right above the open container. Blue-powered like sand entered the container. After completely emptying this flask, he opened the second one and emptied it one by one. He emptied 12 flasks into that container. Decker started to stir it with a long needle, and after he stirred it for 10 or so seconds, red smoke began to rise from the container as if the blood inside was boiling. Chapter 7: Sudden Mutation. Although Jacob was still conscious after Decker fed that unknown pill, he started feeling extremely drowsy because of tremendous blood loss. Even his heartbeat was becoming slower and slower. After mixing whatever he just threw inside that container, Decker picked a strange metallic ball with 2 holes on its opposite sides. He then picked a narrow tube and connected one end to one of this metallic ball's holes, which was a perfect match for this slender metal tube. Decker then mysteriously moved his thumb on his metal ball, and suddenly it started to vibrate. He nodded in satisfaction and then threw the metallic ball inside the container as well. Without delaying even a moment, Decker picked up the other side of that slender tube, connected with a long needle just like the one in Jacob's other arm. Suddenly, red liquid started to flow in drops at a languid pace, clearly the blood from that container. Decker quickly pricked this needle deeply into Jacob's right arm's deep vein. Decker's eyes flashed when he saw everything go according to his plan, and he nodded in satisfaction. He couldn't wait to see the result of this experiment because he knew if he succeeded, then there was only a third transplant left. After he succeeded with the third transplant as well, he'll be able to gather all the data he needed to ensure that these methods weren't hoaxed, and he could use them on himself without caring about any backlash or side effects. While Decker was daydreaming, Jacob, on the verge of losing consciousness, suddenly jolted from his lethargic state. He felt like boiling water was pumping right into his right arm and coursing through his veins. Jacob didn't even have the strength to think, as all his focus was on intense pain, threatening to melt his organs and vein channels. Yet, amid this scorching feeling, he felt somewhat excited from the bottom of his heart. I'm not masochistic, but why the hell I'm experiencing this weird feeling? No, something is not right. It has to be something with this shit this brown fucker is pumping into my body. Jacob was filled with dread and rage. But his old consciousness kept him sane despite all this scorching pain running wild all over his body, and that strange feeling was also helping him keep that pain in check. However, Decker didn't notice because all his focus was on Jacob's body. His pale skin was now bright red because of the heat of that unknown blood, while all his vein channels were darkly visible under his skin as if he was painted with black paint. He's still conscious despite this blood-changing process. It seemed he had built some immunity after bloodstorming Bug's experiment. Good, the more you resist, the more brilliant result I'll be able to gather. Decker was quite happy with all this development. Suddenly, the blood flowing out of Jacob's right hand stopped as the giant buck was almost full of crimson blood. Oh, his original blood runs out, but he's still conscious. Even that painless pill I gave him can't archive such a result, so it had to be something to do with the first transplant. Decker mused as he swiftly pulled out that long needle from Jacob's left hand since it served his purpose. Now all I have to do is wait until half of the refined blood enters his body and then mix his own blood into the reaming half-blood. What a strange way of changing blood, whatever, as long as it prepared him for the third transplant. But I'm still worried if this human's body can contain this much blood. Just this container contains 1 gallon while this bucket can also contain 1 gallon, and it's almost full. So if he exploded, then this hideout would become a mess. Decker mused deeply as he kept observing Jacob. Jacob had no idea about Decker's thoughts because that strange feeling was becoming more and more apparent as the scorching pain was becoming less, which was a good thing. Yet, for some strange reason, Jacob felt this wasn't that simple, as he could vaguely sense something was weird going on within his heart. Jacob was highly right about this because deep inside his heart was a carcass of a bug that was none other than a bloodstorming bug that had drilled into the center of his heart. However, for some unknown reason, this bloodstorming bug died right here, and it was also utterly impossible for Jacob to remain alive with this bug carcass in his heart, yet he was still alive and didn't feel a thing. At this moment, the new blood was seeping through his heart, or a hound rat's heart, implanted into Jacob as his first implantation. This new blood was slowly melting the bloodstorming bug's carcass. Strangely, the melted corpse was getting absorbed by the hound rat's heart and the new blood. His heart was like a sponge that was crazily absorbing the bloodstorming bug carcass and that scorching blood, which was entirely impossible in a sense. However, it was happening. Furthermore, as the hound rat's heart was absorbing this blood, it was slowly reshaping. This hound rat's heart was in no way structured like a human heart, and it was just the closest match Decker could find in cheap. Now, however, this heart, which was somewhat significant and broader than a human heart, was shrinking, and its structure was reforming as if it was molding into a heart of a human. Furthermore, that bloodstorming bug was utterly an unexpected gift that was now merging with this newly reshaping heart. Moreover, something strange appeared right inside his heart's wall. It was too vague, but it was black. Decker did not know about this sudden mutation going on with Jacob's heart, or he'll be shocked and might have killed him instantly out of fear because this type of mutation was supposed to happen after the 4th transplantation. Chapter 8 Pighead. Jacob also didn't know about the changes happening inside his body as he was waiting for trouble to come because he thought it would not be this easy. But it never came at all. The pain slowly faded away, as he could feel fiery blood flowing through his veins. Half an hour passed, and Decker finally noticed Jacob was completely fine now. Besides his bright red skin, he didn't show any sign of pain or struggle as he kept staring at the void like he was oblivious to anything happening around him. Decker frowned a little because he thought this process would probably be quite painful. After all, the powders he mixed in that unknown blood were quite potent, and 2 of them were even highly toxic. That was one of the main reasons he was experimenting on others. Decker had doubts about these transplants after he acquired that journal, but as he watched Jacob was fine, his doubts suddenly started to clear, and they were replaced with ecstasy. Because if that journal was authentic, he didn't need to fear backlash or side effects. Just one more transplant. Decker's eyes flashed with resolution and deep madness. He quickly took the bucket filled with Jacob's original blood and poured it all into that blood container, which was now half. Jacob naturally noticed this but kept his calm. He knew something like this would happen since the entire process was remarkably painless, and in his view, Decker was a sadist who would not let this slide by, and he will torture him. After a moment, the blended blood entered his arm, and Jacob suddenly felt extremely lethargic before he lost consciousness. This time not because of pain but because of this combined blood, which was absorbed by his reforming heart. It seemed the actual pain started when the blended blood entered the system, and it also seemed quite intent that he become unconscious so quickly despite the painless pill, or is there some other reason? Decker mused deeply. He placed his skinny brown hand on Jacob's chest and observed something. After a while, he retraced his hand and mumbled, "Nothing out of the ordinary besides his abnormal heartbeat. So just what is going on?" Abruptly, Decker opened the bag around his neck, and from deep within, he took out a grey-wrapped cloth and unwrapped it delicately, and from within appeared a white book. Decker instinctively looked around, and when he saw no one was watching, he opened it and attentively started to read it, page by page, again and again. The blood transplant continued for over 3 hours, and Jacob's eyes remained shut during this entire process. Decker didn't leave his place and, every now, checked Jacob's condition and carefully wrote it inside a green cover book. The white book was nowhere to be seen. After Decker checked the blood container was completely empty, he pulled out the long needle from Jacob's right hand. Jacob looked completely normal, just like before. His bony constitution hasn't changed at all. Only his skin remained rosy, nothing else. This made Decker even more puzzled because Jacob's body absorbed more than twice the amount of blood Jacob's body had previously, and it didn't overflow or make him explode. "I think I need that thing if I want the accurate result of this transplant. Blood change is dangerous, and I can't completely believe my eyes or my own method. Besides, that thing will benefit the 3rd transplant, the bone marrow fusion." Decker's beastly green eyes flash. "Since the 2nd transplant was seemingly a success, then I needed to wait for a year, and I needed to go myself if I wanted that thing, which would take me less than 6 months. Well, I still needed materials for the 3rd transplant, so I'll be back in 9 months, which is more than enough for this human to be ready for the last transplant." Decker murmured to himself. He turned around and uttered coldly while looking at the 2nd glass cell, "Pig head, put him into green healing liquid." The pig head's beastly eyes snapped open, and the light blue liquid surrounding it sank to the bottom before the glass cell slid open, revealing the pig head. Its pig eyes were utterly listless, and its black pig head was covered in black fur, which completely covered its neck and chest, while his torso was of a burly human male. Pig head moved toward Jacob, and with one of his burly solid hands, he picked him right from his head as his large hand was wrapped entirely around Jacob's bony face. Just like a rag doll, Pig head put Jacob into his glass cell before pressing a green color button, and the glass cell started to close, and after that, light green liquid started to fill the glass cell from bottom to top. After Pig head was done, it stood there listlessly like a puppet, as if it was waiting for its following command. Decker quickly put his green book into a hidden compartment below the staircase without being concerned about Pig head's listless eyes. After he was done with it, he checked the bag around his neck and closed it after confirming something. He looked at Pig head and uttered sternly, "Until I come back, you'll stand guard here. Anyone besides me comes from that door, you will kill it instantly. After every 3 days, drink 1 bucket of blue liquid. If that human slave showed any sign of strange movement, change his liquid to a black one. Decker repeated the exact instructions twice to Pig Head, who just listlessly stayed still on its spot. No one could tell if it was alive or dead. However, Decker knew this Pig Head was very much alive, and it could hear him loud and clear. So, after ensuring he had missed nothing one last time, Decker climbed the wooden stairs and left for his long trip. After the door was closed, the room descended into deadly silence. Pig Head was now facing Jacob's glass cell, which was filled with a green liquid, with its deadpan pig eyes without blinking. At this moment, Jacob, who seemed unconscious, opened his eyelids, revealing his amber-color eyes filled with extreme composure. I'm finally feeling like myself. Chapter 9: An Energy. Jacob had regained consciousness half an hour ago when the blood-changing process was almost done. But he never opened his eyes and remained stoic because he didn't want to give Decker what he wanted. Although Jacob didn't know how, after he woke up this time from his slumber, he could easily control his heartbeat and remain calm while his mind, which was a mess before, had become apparent. Jacob felt he had returned to his old, calm self. Perhaps it was this youthful body, the sudden shock of reincarnation to turn him into this mess, or both, but he couldn't control his emotions and was always on edge. Jacob has never been like this. He had a century of life experience while he was a wily old fox who had ruled over an entire weaponry empire of the whole world for 50 years after his groundbreaking discovery, and had an ingenious mind. After regaining his consciousness again, he suddenly felt mentally and physically cold. This was also the most significant reason he remained so calm despite being manhandled by Pig Head and even fooling Decker. This also gave him many pieces of new information, which Decker revealed himself when he thought Jacob was out cold. He never imagined that Jacob could fool him so easily. Moreover, Jacob discovered his ears and nose had become even more potent than before, and now that he had finally opened his eyes, he could clearly see despite surrounding by this green liquid. Is it because of that mysterious blood that little shit found from a pit? Jacob's attention was automatically drawn to that mysterious blood that the little devil found in a pit, and pump it into his body. This also made Jacob instantly think about cold-blooded species. He was very knowledgeable about cold-blooded species because he had researched and designed an anti-infrared technology that can see through both warm-blooded species and cold-blooded species even in icy water. Well, it doesn't matter anymore since this helps me, and I must re-evaluate my views about this mysterious world. I can't use my common sense from my previous world here. This place probably had magic as well, which is like a myth in my previous world, Jacob passively mused. Then his eyes landed on the tall, burly figure, which was listlessly standing 2 meters away from his glass cell. He was still shocked and amazed by the sight of it and wondered, just how did that little devil make him, or was it also a slave from a special species? Nonetheless, Jacob clearly remembered what Decker had commanded Pig Head, what to do in case he showed any movement, and wondered what that black liquid would do to him. But he was sure about one thing. Decker would not harm him before collecting whatever result he wanted. Maybe that black liquid can put me to sleep like sedatives? So Jacob concluded, but he soon remembered he couldn't move because of mysterious reasons. Yet, at this moment, Jacob suddenly felt something strange inside him out of the blue. It was right inside his heart, and when he focused on that spot, he suddenly felt something had moved a little. However, it wasn't tangible like an object. It was more ethereal. Jacob was naturally astonished and focused more on his heart, and he felt something reposed with the slightest movement as if it wanted him to control it. Just what is it? Jacob wholeheartedly focused on moving whatever this thing was. It was not like he had something else to do at this moment. 3 days pass. Jacob was still entirely focused on moving whatever was inside his heart, without caring about any time or fatigue. He also discovered this green liquid was marvelous because he didn't need to breathe. Secondly, he didn't feel fatigued or need to sleep and could easily concentrate. Most importantly, he didn't feel hungry. This dramatically alarms Jacob when he thinks his conjecture about this world is far more advanced than his previous world was likely true. He still doubted whether his theory of magic was fundamental or not, though. Besides, it wasn't his focus right now, as he was utterly trying to move whatever was inside his heart like he was possessed. Day 7. Jacob could finally move whatever was stuck in his heart, but he could only move it 1 centimeter upward. So it didn't even leave his heart area, but Jacob was still quite happy with his progress. Day 35. Jacob could finally move this ethereal freely around his left chest area. He also found out this thing wasn't inside his blood, but it was like something transparent because with all those veins and muscles, he moved it in any direction, and he had a proposition that he could even summon this thing outside his body. However, its origin was still a mystery to him. But Jacob also discovered that after this thing left his heart, he could clearly feel the area wherever it goes, like his blood circulation, veins, bones, and muscle fiber. Like he was seeing them. This was his most significant discovery, which left him in both shock and excitement. He suddenly felt this thing was not normal, and it might help him in his current predicament. But he knew this was merely his feeling, which he desperately wanted. However, he still didn't lose hope and controlled that thing again. Day 50. Jacob's eyes were tightly shut, just like always, as he was deeply engrossed in himself. He had made a new discovery today that after his long practice, he could finally move that strange energy to his left forearm. Jacob started calling whatever this thing inside him was energy, because it could freely move inside his body with no barrier whatsoever, and this energy also had strange properties. However, he still wasn't sure if this energy was really moving without a path after his recent discoveries. Chapter 10. A Sliver of Hope. Only this energy can give him an accurate feeling of his inner body, but I could also move freely in the same section of his body that this energy crossed after Jacob's weeks of practice. It was like he was opening block paths or just forging alternative pathways inside his body for this energy that was born in his heart. Right now, the energy was slowly moving toward Jacob's hand from his left forearm. If he wanted to retract it, he could easily do it while taking the same path it came from. However, he won't do it because he wants to see what will happen when this strange energy enters his palm or fingers. Will it come out, or was it something else, not just an energy? Jacob had many questions like this, and one of his biggest fear was this energy was actually the bloodstorming bug that once entered his heart. But he was uncertain about it because he didn't know what had happened after passing out that day. He didn't see the bloodstorming bug coming out of his body that day, but he felt that it wasn't coming out, but deep inside, he didn't want that at all. Because if it was the bloodstorming bug, he might not be able to control it after it came out of his body or even harm him. He wanted this thing to be energy like magic or something like that, just as he read in all those novels. Nonetheless, he was willing to take this risk because this might be his only way out of there, or Decker might kill him after getting satisfactory results. Day 53 days. The energy finally entered Jacob's palm this day, and when he moved it toward his thumb. However, at this moment, he could finally measure its accurate length. It was only 3 inches long, while its width he had found out 2 days ago that it was as thin as a hair strand or probably thinner. As for how he found out, he had seen it with his own eyes. Then, 2 days ago, he caught a glimpse of it in the reflection of his glass cell, but only for a moment. But it was enough for Jacob to see a very thin line moving toward his hand, just like one of his veins. This also relieved Jacob that it wasn't that bug, and he thought Decker didn't leave it inside his body. Which also raised the same question again. Just what was it? Could it really be energy like magic or mana? Although Jacob was a little afraid, he was also excited. His old heart was filled with anticipation. He wanted it to be something like magical energy. At this moment, the energy has ultimately reached the tip of his thumbnail. However, it didn't go further. No matter how much Jacob focuses, it just won't budge from that spot. Which made Jacob's heart sink, and all his hopes were shattered. However, at this moment, something happened that caught Jacob entirely off guard. His thumb suddenly twitched. Jacob's pupils dilated and shimmered with sudden realization. He again tried to move his hand, but it was still stuck like always. Finally, when he focused on his thumb, he could quickly move it around free, but it wasn't completely free, and only the part which was covered with that strand of energy was completely free. But this much was enough to make Jacob almost mad with ecstasy because, from the moment he came into this world, he was never able to control his body except his eyelids and eyeballs. Some mysterious power constantly restricted him, and his absolute control was in Decca's hand. However, now suddenly, he managed to move his thumb without restriction. This naturally left him with great delight. Yet, his excitement didn't last long as he returned to his calm self. He quickly retracted that energy in the center of his palm and sent it toward his index finger. He wanted to ensure that this energy could free him from this mysterious restriction. But unfortunately, after the energy left his thumb, it returned to the same restricted self, and Jacob was again helpless as before. However, he only paid attention momentarily to this and again turned his focus toward his index finger. After a while, the energy finally reached his index fingertip and was again blocked from coming out. But Jacob's focus wasn't on it. After he tried to move his index finger, he was elated when his index finger curved slightly under his control. So, this sliver of energy can really render these restrictions useless, but it's only a sliver, and I can't seem to be able to increase it, and I can only move it around my body. Jacob was perplexed. He felt just like someone who had just seen a ray of light but found out there was a bottomless abyss between him and that light. Suddenly, a thought surfaced in Jacob's old mind. This restriction is not physical, then it had to be abstract, right? Since I can examine the inside of my body with this energy, can I find that mysterious restriction place of me with it and even fight it with this energy? Jacob's eyes brightened at this moment, and even his heartbeat increased significantly. He just couldn't get this thought off his head after it came. Without hesitation, the sliver of energy returned to the heart at a lightning-fast speed. This was one of the reasons Jacob felt this wasn't some bug or anything. He could retract it with just a thought, and its speed was almost unimaginable inside his body. That's why he thought of it as mysterious energy and magic. Nonetheless, it wasn't his main concern right now. So he tried to send this energy toward his head where the restriction was, and he was 100% sure about it. However, the moment the energy tried to go upward from his neck, it suddenly stuck there as if a mysterious barrier was stopping it. Jacob had never had this kind of feeling before, and he knew something was not right. Chapter 11: Finding a Path. Jacob focused all his willpower on the sliver of that mysterious energy and tried to move it upward toward his neck. But no matter how much he tried, he met with some invisible barrier. Suddenly, Jacob opened his eyes and saw a little bit of red flowing in the green liquid right in front of him. Blood. Jacob quickly found out where this blood come from. It was from his nose. He won't have known if he didn't feel warm on his nose so suddenly. Is it because I was forceful with that energy just now? Jacob could only think of this plausible explanation. Although he wasn't entirely sure, he didn't dare to take any more chances. He still didn't know what this energy was, or even if it was energy to begin with. He didn't want to cause too much self-harm, which he couldn't comprehend. But why is it resisting in this area while I can easily move it to the other part of my body? Jacob fell deep in thought. Could it be? It's not moved freely around as I thought and follows some kind of vine channel, and it follows some kind of pattern like what was it called again? I clearly remember reading it in the old Buddhist medicine when searching for a way to extend my lifespan. Chakra points. Right. Jacob remembered something like chakra points that exist in legends at this moment because he was obsessed with extending his lifespan, and there wasn't anything he hadn't read that could help him prolong his life. It was another story though, since nothing worked in the end, and all those legends have very minimum effect on over 90 years old Jacob. He was left with only one choice: to use all his influence, favors, and a massive chunk of his wealth to buy advanced machinery just to live like a living corpse. However, even advanced medication wasn't able to save him from death. But there were only 7 main chakra points, and they're all located in the torso and head, which means it possibly can't be legendary chakra points. Then there were also meridians points which were also related to inner energy as well. Jacob mulled over the information he had collected and read in his past life. But he didn't remember anything clearly, since it was tens of years ago. He only remembered superficial information. Sigh. Well, it's not like I need some proof or anything, nor did I have the luxury of time to think over all these legends. Let's see. Even if this energy is following chakra points or meridian points, then I think first I needed to circulate this energy all over my body just like my arm and then try to go for my neck and head. Jacob simply went for it since he won't lose anything by doing this, and he might be able to succeed in the end. It's not like he had somewhere to go right now. He was just floating inside a glass cell. Thereby, Jacob again sent the energy toward his left hand and paved the way for the energy into his other fingers. It was day 65 since Decker was gone. Pighead would move toward a small metal door on the floor every 3 days, right in the center corner between 2 glass cells. He would open it, fill a rope bucket of blue liquid from inside, and then drink it before returning it to his old position and staring at Jacob's naked figure floating in green liquid with his listless pig eyes. One very noticeable thing about Jacob's glass cell was that the light green liquid inside had become lighter as if it was losing its potency slowly. Jacob also started to feel sleepy because of it, and he would sleep after doing his daily routine of carving a path for the sliver of energy inside his body. Jacob naturally noticed the change in green liquid and started to feel dread when he thought about the possibilities after this green liquid completely lost its effects. He couldn't help but thought that he would die of hunger or drowning. Although he didn't feel hungry or need to breathe inside this green liquid, it would still lose its effect, just like medicine, and it needed to be refilled. He even wonders if Decker will be back before he dies tragically. However, he didn't put his hope on Pighead because, after observing him for over 2 months, he knew this guy was a complete idiot with no will of his own, just like a puppet who followed orders blindly. However, he strongly didn't want Decker to come back, not before he clarified his theory about this energy. Jacob noticed that after he was done with his left hand, his progress of carving a path in his right hand was much faster, and today he finally completed it. Now he was going to start working on his torso and legs without any delay. Day 134. It was over 4 months since Jacob and Pighead were left alone in his darkroom. It wasn't dark before though. But just a few days ago, the source of light, which looked like a bulb, suddenly dimmed down and stopped working altogether, making the entire place descend into darkness. But for Jacob or Pighead, this didn't make any difference. Jacob started to sleep for over 10 hours because the effect of that green liquid was becoming vaguer and vaguer. However, Jacob still didn't feel any hunger or feeling of drowning, which made him reach an astonishing conclusion that after this green liquid completely turned transparent, he might fall into complete hibernation. Because Jacob always fell into a long sleep without even him noticing, which left him started for some time. But he soon saw that it was probably because of this liquid he was floating in, and it might have different effects from his assumption. Chapter 12: Restriction and Freedom. This extirpated Jacob's fear of dying out of hunger or drowning, but this also put an unknown fear in his heart. If he fell into hibernation, then he won't probably be able to wake up on his own, which also meant only Decker would be able to wake him up once he came back. Jacob didn't want that at all because he was so close to completely circulating the sliver of energy into his body. Only half of his right leg remained, and he knew it would mostly take him a week to complete it as well. He could not rest if he didn't see the result of his theory, which was also the only hope of leaving this place alive. Even if this hope was based on his delusion, it was still hoped that kept him going. Although I can't do anything in this darkness, I think I slept for 13 hours this time, or probably less, or might be more. This gives me probably 30 or 40 more days before I might fall into hibernation. Fuck if that pig idiot just refiled this green liquid. Jacob cursed Pighead in his mind before again turning his focus on doing his labor again. Day 148. 2 more weeks passed, and Jacob's right hallux was moving up and down as Jacob was quite excited about this moment. It was clear that he had finally been able to move the sliver of that mysterious energy all over his body, and only his neck and head were left. The moment of truth. Jacob's heart was galloping at this moment. With a thought, the energy moved back to his heart from his big toe. He didn't immediately send it toward his neck. He decided to circulate the sliver of energy in his entire body before going toward his neck, forming a pentagram just for a silly reason, which was that he read in a novel once. Jacob slowly controlled the energy and started with his left arm before going to his right arm and left leg. He didn't feel a damn thing, making him silently blush. I should have never believed in those damn stories. Jacob didn't dwell on his embarrassment for too long, quickly controlled the energy, and slowly moved it toward his neckline. Jacob's eyes instantly contrasted when the energy didn't meet any barrier like last time. Ha ha ha. So, I was right about my approach. Jacob was elated and wanted to laugh out loud, which was out of his character. But who could blame him since this little success meant there was still hope for him? Jacob quickly settled himself down and crawled the energy toward his head. He thought it would also cost him some time, but to his astonishment, the energy moved toward his head with no restriction or need for an alternative path, making him even more excited. When the energy reached his skull area, Jacob thought it might come out of his mouth, but it didn't, and as it was moving to the back of his skull, Jacob quickly restrained his ecstasy and observed his head very thoroughly. He knew the restriction placed on him was probably here. Nothing in the back of my head. Jacob found nothing behind his skull area, which was the most expected area where the restriction might be, but it wasn't. However, Jacob wasn't disheartened and moved the energy toward the top of his skull, and he met with the same disappointment. Jacob was a bit panicked, but he still didn't lose hope and commanded that energy to move toward his forehead. At this moment, when the energy was right above his glabella, it suddenly met with a barrier that wasn't a natural one Jacob felt from his body. Jacob's eyes instantly flashed with a sharp light. Found you. He was 100% sure that he had finally found the thing restraining him because he had been controlling this energy for months now, and he knew how it felt like when he met with a natural barrier or blocked pathways. This thing wasn't a barrier nor a pathway. There was something solid, and he even felt the energy jolted a little when it touched it. That was why he was entirely sure he had found the thing he was looking for. First, Jacob looked right toward Pig Head, who was invisible in this darkness, but he knew he was there, and every 3 days, he could hear him moving and drinking his tonic. I don't know if this pig can see me or not. If he can, then he'll do as Decker command him and release that black liquid, and if he doesn't, then... Well, I don't know what he will do without Decker's control, but I won't shun this chance of freedom. Well, it was still unclear if I will gain freedom or not, so there is no need to burn my brain cells on this. Without hesitancy, Jacob again made the energy to move in the same path, and this time he felt clear that something was in his glabella, and for some reason, the energy could tremble. However, Jacob suddenly felt a piercing pain in his brain that he wanted to scream. Yet he couldn't, but sudden lunacy overcame Jacob's eyes as he used more force and rattled that thing which was in his glabella. Suddenly, Jacob felt his lip moving as the liquid entered his mouth. He quickly closed it since he was still inside the liquid. He had instinctively opened his mouth because of the pain, but he quickly reacted and controlled it. The good news was this thing was losing its control over his body. However, this excited Jacob as he helter-skelter tried to push that thing from its place even more fiercely while completely ignoring the pain. This pain wasn't half as painful as the pain he experienced when he first was awake with his entire torso open, nor was it even close to the pain blood-storming bug caused. Jacob knew this pain was the price of his freedom and he'll pay it no matter the amount. Jacob continued to clash the energy with whatever was on his forehead without even stopping for a moment while continuing to endure maddening pain. He could feel this thing had taken root in his skull just like a parasite plant, and he had had to uproot it. As he was shaking the thing inside his head, he slowly gained control over his limbs. Jacob used his full force and tried to move his hand. He knew this energy wasn't enough to uproot that thing in his head. Now that thing wasn't in complete control of his entire body. He wanted to take this chance to use his hand. With extreme difficulty, his right hand finally moved. It was as if Jacob was possessed by lunacy and didn't care about anything or any consequences. All he wanted was freedom from this hellhole, and he will do anything to gain it. Finally, his head reached his forehead while continuing to tremble. Just give up. Jacob's eyes were utterly bloodshot as he stabbed the nails of his thumb and index finger into his glabella with no mercy. Blood got blended into an almost transparent liquid at this moment. Jacob suddenly felt his index finger's nail touch something solid, and he ruthlessly clawed it. This time, Jacob felt his entire brain jolt as that thing finally uprooted from its place. However, Jacob was in a frenzy and didn't let this chance go. With both fingers, he clawed whatever had come off from his skull and pulled it back with a small chunk of his forehead skin. Jacob suddenly felt he had just regained complete control over his body, but he was too tired and fell into slumber without even looking at the thing he was tightly clinching in his fist. The opening on his forehead suddenly healed because of the green liquid. As for the mysterious energy which made all this possible return to Jacob's heart without his command, it didn't come out of that opening. However, Jacob didn't know about it at all as he fell into a deep slumber in the crimson liquid with a clenched hand and a faint smirk on his lips. As for Pighead, just as he expected, he didn't notice his movements at all in this darkness and remained standing still. However, after the wound on Jacob's forehead was completely healed, the green liquid completely turned transparent or crimson since Jacob's blood was blended within now. The main point was that Jacob was now in a state of hibernation after finally being free. What a tragedy. Chapter 13 Awakening. 4 months later, after Jacob fell into hibernation, the voice of tiny footsteps could be heard inside a dark, silent room. Thereupon, the door that had closed for over 8 months made a creaking sound of opening. A surprised yet husky voice sounded at this moment. What happened to the light pearl? Did it run out of energy? If Jacob were awake, he would have instantly recognized that husky voice. This was indeed Decker, who had come back after his long trip. A white light suddenly illuminated the small room from the staircase at this moment. Pighead could be seen standing listlessly right before Jacob's glass cell. He didn't attack Decker because of their connection of master and slave or the moment the door opened. The intruder would have been dead by now if it wasn't Decker himself. Decker slowly descended the stairs. He wore a black cape that was drenched with water, clearly implying that he had just traveled in heavy rainfall. However, Decker's green beastly eyes suddenly went wide when he saw the glass cell filled with crimson color, and Jacob was vaguely visible. His heart sank as he yelled in an infuriated manner, "What the hell happened to him? Didn't I clearly say if you see any strangeness with him, you just have to release the black liquid quickly? Are you dead, you pig-ear chode?" Decker viciously kicked Pighead's leg, which was twice his size, and Pighead reaming, standing like a tower without any expression of pain or distress. Decker knew he was just egging a stone wall, and he wasn't a Pighead match at all, which made him even more infuriated. It must be because of that fucking light pearl, fuck. What bad luck. Decker regained his rationality quickly. He knew Pighead was just an empty husk, and he couldn't expect him to do something rational of his own free will. Suddenly, Decker's long ears twitched as his expression turned into astonishment and ecstasy. His heart is beating. He's alive. Decker strode toward Jacob's cell and pushed a bronze button. Thereby, the red liquid started to sink into the bottom. Decker felt immense relief when he saw Jacob's face, which was completely fine, and he started to breathe normally. Was it some side effect of blood change? It was indeed the right decision to get a bloodline scanning scale. I won't be able to find accurate results without it. Decker felt quite pleased with himself as he looked at the large bag under his cloak. Before, he was startled by Jacob and forgot about the weight on him. Now that he knew Jacob was fine, he finally relaxed. He saw the red liquid was still only half sank, so he pressed the blue button beside the bronze and moved toward the table to put down the large bag. He barely missed Jacob's clenched left hand, or he would have been overreacting right now. On the other hand, Jacob still didn't know he had just dodged a bullet because of Decker's overconfidence. He finally opened his eyelids after 4 months. After a momentary confusion, he suddenly remembered what had happened and just happened to see Decker's back. He flinched for a moment before instantly understanding what had happened. I fell into hibernation. Jacob quickly saw the sinking red liquid, and he knew he was right. Then he suddenly remembered about the thing he pulled from his forehead before falling into hibernation. He felt inside his left fist a small stone-like object, not some parasite bug he was guessing before. But he moved quickly as he opened his mount, put whatever was in his fist between his teeth, closed his mouth, stood straight like status, and closed his eyes. Jacob knew he only had time while Decca's back was still facing him, so he quickly reacted. He didn't want to clash with this brown devil right now. Not while he was still behind glass with unknown sturdiness and that pig freak was still gawking at him. However, his movement was clearly noticed by Pig Head, and since Decca didn't give him a new command, he moved toward the button panel, so he could press the black button since Jacob had just made a strange movement. Luckily for Jacob, Decca clearly caught the movement of Pig Head, and he yelled in perplexity. You, empty-brain chode, what the hell is wrong with you? First, you nearly let my precious subject die, and now you're going to waste my precious rare-grade healing liquid. Go back to your fucking cell and activate the blue liquid, useless crap. Decca cursed Pig Head many times and even kicked him with his little legs to release some of his frustration. Jacob calmly listened to Decca's curses and sneered inside. Yes, just caged those pig muscles. Without him, I don't believe you can put on with my surprise attack. Jacob's heartbeat didn't increase this time as he remained static while he felt a new liquid start to fill the glass cell. I will only get one chance at this, and if I fail, I might as well commit suicide and then fall back into this brown fucker's hands. Jacob was ready for a do-or-die situation. Since Decca would wait for him to wake up, he knew he had time to make a solid strategy. First, Jacob's attention was drawn to the object in his mouth. He dared to bluntly put it in his mouth because even after months of remaining in his hand, this thing didn't do anything, and it was a solid object, like stone. All he felt was two needles on this object's surface, and he could guess that this thing was probably planted by hands, and it wasn't alive like a parasite, and it probably only worked on the brain or the same spot it was planted in his head, that's why it was harmless right now. Jacob soon discovered that this thing was only 0.5 centimeter in size and was very solid and diamond-shaped. Even with his teeth, he couldn't seem to damage it. This thing can do wonders if I'll use it right. Jacob's mind was working at lightning speed at this moment. He wasn't just some random old man. He was the freaking tycoon and emperor of the weapon industry, Jacob Steve, who shocked the world with his wits and discovery or couldn't have reacted so quickly, only within seconds after just waking up. Chapter 14 Positions changed. Decca quickly changed into a new green outfit that looked like a grown, and after sorting out all the things he had collected and bought from his 8-month journey, he sat on a wooden chair comfortably. He looked at Jacob's glass cell, which was now filled with light blue liquid just like Pig Head's cell, and a light glint flashed past his eyes. Should I wait for him to awake, or should I just test him as is it? Decca mulled over this choice. He picked up the blue wooden cubic box from the table. It was 1 foot in diameter. He slowly opened it, and inside was a black rectangular device, which was 8 inches in size. It had a 5 inches black display, and round, shining red buttons were on the other 3 inches of the black area. Right below these 4 buttons was a tiny needle, which was hollowed from the inside. Decca caressed this device delicately, like it was his woman's bosom, and mused. Although this bloodline scanning scale is of a rare grade, it still cost me half of my fortune, and I can't even find it easily in this barren place. Whatever, as long as this last experiment succeeds, I will need all the data I want, and then I can leave this damn place. Once I become powerful enough, I will make those arrogant bastards tremble beneath my foot. Decca's eyes were filled with hysteria as he remembered something unpleasant and repulsive. He couldn't remain calm after that and stood up. Why the hell would I need to wait for my slave? Decca mumbled as he pressed the bronze button again, and the blue liquid started to sink again. Jacob was utterly awake as he remained static while he felt the blue liquid keep sinking, and he could breathe again. He knew this was his only chance, or Decca might notice something amiss as time passed. Decca was entirely oblivious to Jacob's ambush plan. He blindly believed in his strong hearing ability. He could have easily detected Jacob's fast heart rate, but Jacob had completely controlled his nerves, especially his heart rate, after controlling the mysterious energy for months. Likewise, he deeply benefited from it, unbeknownst to him. After 3 minutes, the liquid finally sank completely, and Decker pressed something again right beside the glass cell and then finally started to slide down, revealing Jacob's naked, skeletal figure. Decker still didn't notice anything amiss with Jacob. He coolly extended his hand toward Jacob's right hand to grab it. But something entirely out of Decker's wildest imagination happened at this moment when Jacob's eyelids snapped open, revealing his icy amber eyes, and he quickly grabbed Decker's brown hand with a powerful grip. Decker was startled at that moment with this sudden turn of events, and this moment was all Jacob needed to react. Jacob's right hand, which was formed into a scissor-shaped, moved at full speed, and without any delay, his index and middle finger were stabbed into Decker's wild opened eyes. Ah! Decker shrilled and screamed like a pig when he felt Jacob's bony, sharp fingers in his eyes. Jacob still wasn't done. He released his grip from Decker's wrist, forming a punch, and let loose a sharp husky sound before throwing a punch filled with hatred and resentment toward Decker's pointy chin. Decker felt like he was struck by a sledgehammer and instantly fell to the ground, bleeding from his eye sockets and mouth. Jacob has completely caught him with his pants down, and with the boxing and defensive skills he learned in his past life, he quickly manhandled Decker, who was small and weak without his tricks. However, Jacob still wasn't calm, despite seeing listless Decker on the floor. He knew he wasn't dead and didn't want him dead either. Jacob opened his mouth and spat something in his hand. He could finally see the cause of his suffering. It was a red diamond-shaped object with 2 needles on one side and a very tiny black symbol on the other side. Jacob didn't know what it was, nor did he care at this moment. He looked at Decker with a vicious smile on his bony, pale face. He sat on him and, with bare nails, he dug right in the middle of his forehead. Crimson blood gushed out, but Jacob was utterly unfazed. He would never show mercy toward his enemies, and Decker was someone he hated the most. Even in his previous life, he never thought of killing someone this much as he thought of killing Decker. Jacob placed the diamond-shaped object right where he dug Decker's skin and pressed it with full force, and when he felt he was properly stuck on the right spot, he vaguely saw a very tiny black light. "Oh, it's active like this, huh?" Jacob was finally assured. But he still wasn't done. He started to take off Decker's clothes. Decker was plump, as his brown torso was also filled with some battle scars. Jacob's eyes landed on 2 bracelets in Decker's hand. One had a black ribbon, and a red ruby was embedded in it, which reminded him of that diamond he had just planted into Decker's forehead. This should be the remote control of that stone. Jacob quickly took it off and saw a tiny black mark right in the middle of this ruby, the same as the red diamond. Decker wore it on his own wrist, and then his eyes landed on the second bracelet, which had a black band and a dark blue gemstone embedded on this one. But this one looked more exquisite, and there was a small string of tiny symbols in its center. This should be the controller of that pig muscles. Jacob took off this bracelet as well and put it on. Lastly, his eyes landed on a black chain and black pendant, which Decker was wearing. The pendant was a pitch-black circle, 4 centimeters in diameter. However, when looking at it closely, it was delicately carved in an extremely vivid snake that was eating its own tail forming this circle, and it looked very vivid, as if it was alive. Furthermore, there were marks left inside the interior of this snake circle, which clearly implied that there was a piece missing from this pendant. Jacob instantly felt he had seen this kind of symbol before, but he didn't seem to remember where. Nonetheless, he also pocketed that chain and pendant, and after making sure Decker had nothing left on him, he put him into his own glass cell and released the blue liquid. Jacob never wanted to kill Decker in the first place, not after he got his hands on the slave stone. Jacob wore a stiff smile as he looked at the unconscious Decker in the glass cell. Their positions had changed now. "I'm going to enjoy this." Chapter 15 Blood Analysis. After Jacob was finally done handling Decker, he felt immense relief as all the adrenaline rushing through his veins finally started to calm down, and he felt tired. He still couldn't believe that he had managed to thwart a monster and completely turn the tables on him. He slowly walked toward the same chair where Decker was just sitting a couple of moments ago. Sigh. This feeling for walking again. Jacob let loose a heavy sigh like an old man as he completely relaxed on Decker's chair and closed his eyes. And for the first time after he reincarnated, He felt alive and free. Freedom. Jacob's hoarse voice rang at this moment. This was probably the first word he ever spoke. His voice was powerful for his bony self, as Jacob's old man-like demeanor made it even more imposing. A happy smile suddenly emerged on his pale face. It was a sincere smile of happiness. I can finally say I got another shot at life, and I'm going to live it to the fullest, just like my old life, and who knows, I might be able to live much longer in this mysterious yet magical world. Jacob's smile widened. He didn't seem like someone who just popped an imp goblin's eyes and beat the crap out of him. He just looked like an ordinary young man filled with grand ambitions. After enjoying the moment for a while, Jacob smiled wryly at his naked self. In his happiness, he almost forgot he was still in his birthday suit. He looked around and clearly saw what was in this small room beside that torture table and his old home. There was a small closet at one of the corners right below the stairway and a shelf on the other corner of the table. Besides these two extra things, there wasn't anything except the new large bag Decker had bought or Decker's old bag. Both of them were lying on the torture table at this moment. Jacob completely ignored everything else and went straight toward the closet and opened it. He would not feel comfortable without any clothing on his body. This closet has only 3 shelves, and only Decker's size clothes are in it, which won't fit Jacob, who is 2 heads taller than Decker. In the end, he picked up 2 black cloaks. He rolled one around his waist and draped one on his shoulder. Much better. Jacob felt comfortable after hiding his assets, and finally paid attention to those 2 bracelets he pocketed from Decker. He first looked at the dark blue gem bracelet. He didn't know how to use it or how to make himself its owner, but he never saw Decker using them openly since he always commanded him literally. Jacob tried to imitate Decker and speak closer to the dark blue gem bracelet. "Pighead, come out." He looked toward Pighead's cell with anticipation, but nothing happened. Jacob's brows frowned a little and mused. Could it be I need my blood to form some kind of connection with these gems? He picked up a knife-like tool from the steel tray and perked his finger, and his blood dropped on the dark blue gem, and it instantly absorbed it. Jacob's eyes flash as he quickly drops his blood on the red one, and it also quickly absorbs it. Although he didn't feel anything, by those 2 gemstone reactions, he knew his theory was successful. "Pighead, move your head." This time, there was boundless confidence in Jacob's heavy voice. Pighead really moved his head after receiving Jacob's command. At least those books have some use. Jacob was quite satisfied with this development. "Let's see how you escape my grasp now, little fucker." A cold glint flashed in Jacob's eyes as he gazed at Decker's cell before he averted his gaze. His eyes landed on the device Decker was carrying when he opened his cell and picked it up from the floor. It just looked like a smartphone. Could this world be as advanced as mine or even more? Jacob's thoughts wandered for a moment, but he shook his head and smirked. "I'm not even outside, and I'm already thinking like this. You're just as greedy as always, Jacob." A light chuckle escaped Jacob's mouth before he pressed the buttons on the device and tried to activate it. He mused that since Decker had bought it, and it was in such fancy packing, it must be pretty expensive and essential to him. However, nothing happened, no matter which button he pressed or how long he pressed. "Is it broken?" Jacob murmured to himself, and his eyes finally landed on the small needle at the bottom of those buttons. Jacob remembered Decker coming for his hand at that time. Did it need my blood to activate? Jacob was fascinated and pressed his thumb on the small needle, which instantly pierced through his skin, making it even more evident that it was made for this purpose. Just as Jacob's blood entered the needle, the black screen lit up in white, and an unfamiliar yet familiar black character appeared. Numbers. Oh, I can read this language. Is it because of this body's previous owner I can read and understand this world's language? Jacob was quite sure about this. The countdown on the black screen finally ended after 9 seconds. New words appeared, which made Jacob intrigued. The blood analysis has been completed. Please press the button to check the result. Oh, is this thing like some measuring device? Jacob quickly pressed the first button, and the screen changed again. Species: human. Sex: male. Age: 23. Strength: 2 weak. He pressed the second button without delay, as he expected this much after from his bony body. Bloodline: not pure, fusion. Human bloodline, uncommon tier 70%. Rat hound, rare tier 5%. Unknown bloodline, 20%. Note: please purchase a higher grade device to discover about this bloodline and more information. Unknown bloodline, 5%. Note: please purchase a higher grade device to discover about this bloodline and more information. I have 2 unknown bloodlines in my body, and this device is too low grade to identify them, which means this rare tier bloodline is this device's limit. But what the fuck is this rat hound? Just what kind of shit this little shit was doing with this body all this time? Jacob couldn't help but curse Decker before pressing the third button. Chapter 16: Blood Lifespan. Jacob knew he had to now live with all those experiments Decker had done on him, and they can't be undone just like that, so he had no choice but to accept the reality. He pressed the third button to see just what kind of information this would reveal. Blood Analysis Report. Because of 4 different tier bloodline fusions within human species, uncommon physique and uncommon bloodline, this fusion is exceptionally harmful and deadly for the user. Please extract other bloodlines as soon as possible. Note: please purchase a higher grade device for more accurate blood analysis results and more information. The heck? Is this company selling products or advertising them by selling them? Jacob cursed and berated the company behind this device harshly. But he couldn't help but feel worried when he saw the bloodline analysis report. Even without this device, he knew this kind of blood change couldn't be done as Decker did, and his being alive was a miracle on its own. Jacob knew he was fucked and hated Decker even more, when he glanced at the glass cell filled with a blue liquid with a hint of Decker's blood. Sigh. Let's see what the last button can tell me. Jacob helplessly shook his head like an old man. A new display emerged. Blood lifespan. User has approximately less than 2,000 days of life because of user blood fusion. Warning: this result is not entirely accurate and only depends on the blood analysis. Note: please purchase a higher grade device for more accurate blood lifespan results and more accurate information. What? Less than 2,000 days? Jacob's eyes dilated when he saw this line and panicked. There wasn't anything scarier than death for him out there, and definitely not after he was reincarnated and finally became free. No, this shiny device is clearly flawed since they put such advertisements in every fucking report. Jacob muttered to himself. He just didn't want to believe it, even though deep down he knew Decker's experiments were enough to gain such results. Jacob threw the blood analysis device on the table and just remained motionless on his chair while his eyes closed. What a stroke of damn bald luck, hair. I got this new life in this new mysterious world. But I already knew I'd die in less than 7 years just because of a freaking little monster. Ha, truly lamentable, Jacob thought while bemoaning his bad luck. After he calmed down, he quickly accepted the fact about his lifespan because he wasn't someone who lived in delusions. Well, since this device had said to extract the types of the blood of other species can undo all this, then it might be possible to salivate my situation. Or I can always find another human and change his blood with my own. It's not like I didn't experience it already. Jacob's amber eyes snapped open as a vicious glint flashed past them before he regained his calm demeanor. Thump, thump. Suddenly, a light sound of something knocking against a hard surface drew Jacob's attention, and when he looked at the source, he pulled an extremely frosty smile. He's awake. These strange liquids really do wonders. Decker was currently wiggling his limbs inside the glass cell while his mouth was opening and closing. He clearly was still shocked by what had happened to him. Although Decker was completely fine, his 2 eyes were now just black sockets. Before, Jacob didn't hold back with his surprise attack and ruthlessly destroyed Decker's eyes. Eyes were the weakest spot of any living being, and Jacob didn't know Decker was just bark and no bite. That's why he went for his eyes and was so ruthless with his attacks. Nonetheless, He didn't regret even a little what he did. Jacob finally stood up and coolly moved toward Decker's cell with a wintry smile on his face. "Look what we have here, a blind little shit, huh? Say still and close your mouth." Decker suddenly trembled when he heard this deep voice filled with mockery and viciousness. All his movement suddenly stopped after this heavy voice faded. The parasite gem. Decker instantly knew he had been enslaved, and his heartbeat shot up tremendously. He finally remembered how he ended up like this, and an extremely weak figure flashed past his mind. How did that human manage to extract the parasite gem without dying? His head was filled with these questions, but alas, he couldn't speak right now since he was now on Jacob's mercy, just like when Jacob was. Their positions have been swapped and changed. Jacob was quite pleased with Decker's reaction, as he also pushed the bronze button on the button panel on the wall, just like Decker. "Pig head, come out." Jacob also commanded Pig head. He won't be taking any risk with Decker since he knows nothing about what Decker is or what kind of things he is capable of, and Pig head is his strongest trump card. Because he didn't have free will like Jacob and Decker. He was sure of it because Pighead's eyes were always listless, with no luster of life whatsoever, which means he was dead or something like a death state. Or someone like Decker can never control such a monster. Pighead's eyes snapped open as he pressed something inside his glass cell, and the liquid started to sink. So, his glass cell had an inner control panel, which means Decker wasn't afraid he would turn against him. Moreover, he can easily awake from his sleeping slate. Was it the liquid or something else? Jacob mused. Jacob didn't dwell on this topic for now since Decker's cell was finally emptied, and he was eager to give Decker a taste of his own medicine. He opened Decker's cell and calmly sat on the chair again while looking at expressionless blind Decker, who was standing there like a little puppet. Pighead also came out of his cell at this moment. Jacob's lips curled as he said coldly, "I don't like the way you're standing, slave, so kneel." Chapter 17A Confession 1. Kneel. Decker fell to his knees with no hesitation after hearing Jacob's powerful command. "See, it wasn't so hard to kneel, right?" Jacob said in his heavy voice with a hint of mockery. "Revenge is a dish best served cold." Jacob's eyes flashed. Decker had an expressionless face, and he didn't even have eyes to see Jacob's gloating expression at this moment. All he could do was just hear Jacob's mocking voice, which pierced his heart in millions of ways. "I could escape pursued by an army of experts, but in the end, I fell into the hands of my own slave. Truly retribution." Decker silently lamented at this moment. He was a very careful person because you had to be very careful if you wanted to survive out there with no existing strength, and Decker was such a case. He didn't have anything except his knowledge and the life-saving tricks he had learned from deadly experiences. But in the end, he was played by his own slave, and the slave was a weak human, nevertheless. Although he didn't know how Jacob got free from the parasite gem, he knew after what he had done with Jacob, his death won't be pretty. Furthermore, his eyes were now gone, and he knew they couldn't be regenerated, not here at least, and without his eyes, he was nothing but a blind old goblin who anyone could squish like a bug. That's why he stopped resisting and waited for his death. Jacob said again at this moment, "You can speak freely." Although he wanted nothing more than to kill Decker in the cruelest way possible, he wanted the most information about this world from Decker. Foremost, he knew nothing about where he was or what kind of place this was. He had already seen Decker's drenched cloak, but he had never heard a rain sound in this place before, which meant they were deep underground, and Decker must have left many traps outside for intruders. That's why he didn't dare to leave this place on his own. Secondly, Decker was clearly hiding from someone here. He could tell just by how rigorously Decker behaved when he left last time. Third, Decker seemed quite resourceful since it could acquire this kind of equipment and set it up in this hellhole. Those two glass cells and liquids were high-tech enough to leave Jacob speechless and to wonder. Lastly, Decker was a wily fox who had extraordinary life experiences, and he might know all kinds of places and secrets, and Jacob was very interested in them. As a wily old fox, he knew the information would be his biggest weapon if he wanted to survive in his world filled with monsters like Decker. Decker's lips finally opened as he spoke at this moment. If you want information from me, then boy, let me tell you this. I would rather die than give my knowledge to a human slave. This parasite gem might be able to control me physically, but it can't control my free will. So that diamond was called Parasite Gem, a fitting name indeed. Jacob nodded his head in understanding. Jacob coolly spoke at this moment as he expected it. Ho ho, wolves may lose their teeth but not their nature. It's quite fitting on you. Decker was suddenly intrigued by this strange phrase that he had never heard before. Jacob's bitter voice rang again. You're indeed correct. I need information. But you're incorrect about something, and that is, I'm not requesting. Decker sneered at this moment. You're worse human slave. I'm not like you humans who can be broken by pain. Jacob merely smiled and said, Then let me ask you, even if Parasite Gem can't control your free will, it can still control your body completely, right? So, what if it can control my body? What can you do worse, inflict some pain, or cut my limbs bit by bit? Or put some bug in my body? Or maybe even rape me? You have no idea how much suffering I had to endure to get to this point. You're just one of those lucky bastards. Nothing special. Decker chucked coldly, showing no fear whatsoever. Jacob's eyes finally narrowed. He could tell Decker was a complete madman who feared nothing and was always ready for death. This kind of person was something he hated the most because they were too hard to deal with. Furthermore, this little devil was not even human, and Jacob knew nothing about his kind or weakness, which put him in a disadvantageous position. Fine, since you don't fear pain. What about a quick death? Jacob tried another approach. Quick death, huh? Thanks, but no thanks. I will not reveal anything to you even if you promise this entire world. Decker remained stubborn. Jacob's expression turned frosty this time. He blurted, You know, all my life, I never killed anyone, nor did I torture anyone. You know why? Decker sneered mockingly. Because you're a pussy, and in the end, you become my slave. Ha ha ha, such is the fate of the weak and ignorant. His voice was filled with self-mockery and bitterness toward the end. Jacob didn't mind Decker's ridicule since he had no idea how this body ended up in this kind of situation, and said, Now shut up and listen. I never kill because it's not like I can't or didn't want to. But I was afraid. Afraid that if I start, I won't be able to stop. That I will enjoy it and become addicted to it. It all started when I saw my mother getting shot right into her left eye by a stray bullet from a gang fight when I was right in her embrace. I was only 10 at that time, but I will never forget that scene and the feeling when I was covered in her warm blood. And I was confused and didn't know what had happened. I just keep calling out for her while desperately crying. Afterward, I know I was never the same. I was so angry that I wanted to burn the entire world and let all the living beings feel my pain, which I can't describe. Chapter 18A Confession 2. I was always so angry that I just wanted to kill everyone, and the people I hated the most were not those gangs who were fighting, but my father, whom I never come into contact with until later, and blamed my mother's death on him. Because if he were there, my mother wouldn't have to work so late, and she would never have always come and get me from my grandparents' house. Despite that, I never get myself to see through my desire because I knew deep down if I ever started, I could never hold myself back, and I always have my grandparents watching over me. Yet, I always had this demon deeply hidden within me, so to keep it in check, I put my attention elsewhere, and ironically, I chose the same business which caused my mother's death: weaponry. I didn't know why, but I got a strange satisfaction whenever I researched those weapons of mass destruction. It put me at ease. Or I could say it keeps that demon in check. The people who died because of me were many, and despite knowing this, I still didn't stop because I couldn't stop. Even though I never killed them myself, I designed and created the tools that can kill anyone and anywhere. I created them so meticulously that when they're used for the kill, the target will never have a chance to escape alive. I even developed a new weapon and released it to the world, and I even became a tycoon because of it. Because of it, people called me a genius researcher, not a killer. However, that wasn't the only technology one developed. There were 10 even more terrifying weapons I designed, but I never made them public or even told anyone about them because I knew if any one of those weapon blueprints saw the light of the day, then it might really burn the entire world down, and I don't want it since I would turn into ashes as well. However, I could never stop myself from continuing to walk on this path, because this will give me the most incredible pleasure. This is how I could live like an average person. I even had a happy family. But you know what? I was never able to throw that thought of how it would have felt to kill myself out of my mind. Not until I was close to my death. In the last years of my life, I found I craved my life far more than that bloodlust or anything else, as a matter of fact, and finally overcome that demon which was with me for my entire life and my bloodlust. However, what I could never conquer was death. Even if I slow it down, it still comes and gets me. This finally made me understand that life was far more precious than I thought, and I even felt remorse about what I had done in my entire life. I feel genuine despair, a terror which only a dying person would understand. Regardless, somehow after I awake here, and you put me through all those suffering that I never imagined before, I found out that the demon within me was still there. It never left or was eliminated. I unknowingly hold control of it, and you help me understand it. Jacob's face was exempt from any emotion as he confessed he had been carrying for all his life. He never thought he would tell anyone about it and he'll carry it to his grave, and he did. But after encountering Decker, he felt like telling him all this because Decker was someone he got to talk with after a very long time. In all those years living with the help of those machines, he could never speak or think straight. Someone seldom visited him, and even if someone were talking to him, he would hardly understand the words because of the condition which he put himself into. But after taking over this body, he felt alive again, but Decker still taught him that this world was full of ruthless people and monsters like him, and it was far more dangerous than his previous world, and he had to be ruthless if he wanted to survive here. Nevertheless, he still hated Decker since he put him through all that pain and despair, and now he was even refusing to talk. "Do you know why I was telling you all this?" Jacob impassively said. "You may speak freely." He didn't want Decker to interrupt him, so he made him shut up before. Decker suddenly started laughing crazily. "Ha ha ha. It seemed like your brain was thoroughly damaged because of all those experiments. Your delusions really know no bounds." Ha ha ha. How could he not laugh? Jacob was talking about his previous life and reincarnation. Decker didn't understand any of it since it all seemed like a fantasy story to him and a lunatic's imagination, so he would naturally not believe it, even if you beat him to death. The concept of reincarnation just does not fit well with someone like Decker. Jacob remained expressionless and said, "Maybe you're right or maybe not. But don't you understand the hidden meaning behind my story? Or are you just an intelligent idiot? Heh, you're just a maniacal human, so stop talking about intelligence with me." Decker sneered. Jacob didn't mind and continued. "It's simple. Actually, it's like this when you're in a desperate situation or desperate for something, your mind will never stop thinking about its solution and even started to create different ways to solve it or get the thing you wanted. You'll even imagine robbing that thing you want or magically solving your situation with almost impossible facts in play. However, when you accept that the situation is hopeless or you can't get what you want, your mind will never think about these solutions. But this will also put a hold on your thinking, and you'll just limit yourself as you keep doing the same again and again until you simply stop thinking creatively and cage yourself in a mental cage you create for yourself. You see, your situation is like the latter scenario. Since you accept your death, you'll never budge or at least think this way. However, I'm the former kind because I desperately want that information, and I will keep trying and thinking all the possible ways to obtain it, and this helps me think out of the box, which is what we call imagination. Chapter 19 Clues about New World. However, I'm the former kind because I desperately want that information, and I will keep trying and thinking of all the potential ways to obtain it, and this helps me think out of the box, which is what we call imagination. And this is also the reason you lose to me. I never lost hope, even when I felt like death was the right and easy end to my suffering. I just never stop thinking and grab any straw that can help me float in that despair. And now I'm sitting here without a parasite gem while you're kneeling just like me at the same spot with a parasite gem. Jacob's words were like invisible blades that cut deeper into Decker's heart and mind. Even though he didn't want to admit it, Jacob was telling the truth. He had already given up resisting and accepted his unprecedented death. But he still didn't admit it because he still looked down on Jacob, partly because he was a human and partly because he was his former slave. He would still rather die than admit anything to Jacob. He just didn't want to give him the satisfaction he wanted. Human slave, your words are nothing but empty, and you are a lunatic, so you still will get nothing from me. You said you were afraid of killing others just because you'll get addicted to it? Don't let me laugh. Nobody can resist such a temptation their entire life, much less someone like you who is still wet behind his ears. You're saying you create weapons that will never miss their targets, huh? Well, your imagination is admirable, but let me break it to you. Do you hear of giant race? Not even weapons created by the dwarf race can penetrate through their skin, much less this nonsense you're spouting. Decker finally retorted with an angry tone. But Jacob's expression couldn't help but change into astonishment when he heard giant race and dwarf race. He still didn't know what kind of race Decker belonged to, but he never thought there were mythical races like giants and dwarfs that would exist in this world. This world probably had magic as well. Jacob's heart couldn't help but race slightly when he thought about magic because he still could feel that strand of energy inside him, and after hearing Decker's words, he was more assured that magic existed in this world. However, Decker took Jacob's fast heartbeat in the wrong way and disdainfully scoffed. What afraid now? You humans merely live in the uncommon races region with all those uncommon rank races, so you naturally didn't have any idea about the terror of races from the rare races region. So, shut your fucking bullshit and snap out of your horny delusions where you can fuck whoever you want and stop your fuck shit about imagination. There's nothing but the strength that can give you the right even to fantasize. Jacob finally returns to his calm self as he listens to Decker's disdainful words, which reveal even more about this world and the status of a human here. So, humans are considered an uncommon race, huh? Jacob couldn't help but felt pity for humanity since he was also a human in both his previous and new life. Jacob asked again, so why don't you just tell me everything I want to know, and I might let you go? What do you think? After Decker's brief outburst, he now wanted to acquire more information about this world. Decker also calmed down after he castigated Jacob and said stubbornly, go fuck yourself. Jacob merely shook his head in disappointment and said, since I can't control your free will, so be it. But don't forget, I can control your body. Heh, do your worst, slave. Decker merely sneered as he revealed a mocking smile, shocking his beastly teeth. Jacob suddenly chucked before saying, you say you need power even to imagine, right? But let me make it absolutely clear you're nothing but someone who has been suppressed all his life by others, and now you only see this world in two colors, black and white, right or wrong, life and death. Your mind has become accustomed to being suppressed after your entire miserable shitey little life. I can easily see through you, just by the depression you showed while experimenting on me, and the way you're living out of nowhere with no friends or family is proof of your pathetic life history and narrow viewpoint. Decker's expression twisted in shock and then hatred after Jacob's taunt. Jacob merely sneered coldly and said, what? Did I hit a nerve? Did the little guy finally remember being trampled under others' feet so often that you can still feel the pressure of their foot and taste the dirt under their foot? Tell me, oh magnificent little shit. Decker almost spat fire from his mouth because what Jacob said was very close to the actual truth, and he hated nothing but this period of his life and finally couldn't take it any more of Jacob's insults. You fucking chode. Shut up. Jacob snorted before Decker could utter another word. I have enough of your shits. Let me show you there's always a third way. Decker had again become completely expressionless after Jacob made him shut his mouth. Since your eyes are gone, I have you use the power of imagination to get what I want, and this will also prove that you can also imagine, despite being my little slave. Said Jacob coldly, with a calm expression. Although he knew this was going to be troublesome, he really had a way to get what he wanted. And if even it didn't work, then he'll just have to put Decker's words about not being afraid of torture or pain through a savage test. Jacob knew very well that if you do not experience it yourself, you'll never know the fear of approaching death. In his youth, He wasn't afraid of dying, just like any other hot-blooded youth. And only when the time really came did he find out just how much he feared not being able to live. Chapter 20. This is bad. Let's test a slave's imagination, shall we? Jacob's cold voice sounded in Decker's ears, which were utterly expressionless right now. Jacob said, I already told you, you're kneeling in the same position as once I was, so you could immediately picture it intuitively since you once had eyes, and you're more familiar with this place than anyone inside this room. Jacob's eyes flashed as he said, point your right-hand index finger toward the pighead glass cell. Decker's right hand suddenly raised straight, and his index finger started to point toward pighead's glass cell, and when it stopped, it was only 2 centimeters off the mark. Adjust it 2 centimeters left, and you'll be pointing at the right in the center of the glass cell. Jacob coolly commanded, and Decker did just that. See, now you know exactly where you're kneeling without even having your eyes. Not bad for a salve imagination, I might say. Jacob coldly sneered. Decker, on the other hand, had very different thoughts right now. This bastard human is more cunning than I imagine. He even found the trick to use the rare-grade parasite gem. Decker felt a chill run down his spine because he clearly knew the parasite gem could only control the physique, not the brain. But it was still not to be underestimated because even without a brain, the body was still capable enough to talk. As long as the other party knew what to ask and how to ask, they could easily control the celebration, and Jacob was doing just that right now. Jacob quickly thought this advantage to parasite gem, although the victims still had their free will and celebration. It was still not that simple because the body could quickly reveal what you're thinking as long as your brain thinks about it. You can't just turn off your brain, nor can you get control over it because it is just too impossible. Decker was trying his best not to think about what Jacob wanted, but no matter what, for a microsecond, his brain would instantly think of what Jacob will ask, and this window was enough for Jacob as long as he asked the right question. Even if Decker controlled his brain and instantly removed the information, Jacob wanted to know he couldn't beat his brain to it. Jacob again asked, are we underground right now? If yes, then move your hand right. If no, then move it to the left. Decker's hand quickly moved to the right. I thought so. Are there any traps? Move your hand in the same pattern for yes and no. Jacob asked. He wanted to make sure about this point as well. Decker's hand again moved to the right, which meant there were traps outside. Jacob only sighed and asked, see, this wasn't too hard, right? Now let's see. I clearly remembered the last time I heard an extremely familiar sound, a sound of a book being closed, followed by a strange sound when you thought I was still unconscious after the blood-changing process, but I wasn't. Can I get the information I want from that book? Decker's heart couldn't help but tremble when he heard Jacob's words, and he desperately tried to think about something else, but alas, he had already thought about that book, and his hand moved to the right in affirmation. This is bad. Decker couldn't help but think grimly. Jacob instantly followed with another question without giving Decker any chance to ruin this opportunity. Is this book inside this room? If it is, point your finger in that direction, and lower your hand if it's in your bag. Decker's finger trembled slightly as if he was fighting for control of his body as blood started to trickle from his nose. But Jacob didn't try to stop Decker. He already got his answer from Decker's desperate action and the slightest movement of his finger toward the right side. Before he wasn't sure if his guess about this book was correct or not, but now he was absolutely sure that book was inside this room and hidden somewhere. He just had to find it now. But Jacob was shocked when he saw Decker's finger jammed in one place while trembling as blood was trickling down from his nose and eyes. He couldn't help but marvel at Decker's willpower. He had experienced just how powerful this parasite gem control was. Even he could only do something like Decker with the help of that mysterious strand of energy, but Decker was doing it without it. Stop. Jacob knew if he didn't stop Decker's struggle, he might die, and Jacob didn't want that for now. But it also made it more apparent that Decker was really ready to die and wasn't afraid of pain or torture. However, Jacob still underestimated Decker's lunacy. He continued to try to move his body without any sign of stopping. He clearly intended to kill himself. Jacob quickly said, Pighead, knock him cold. Pighead, who was listlessly standing behind Jacob, finally moved and quickly slapped Decker unconscious while shattering his teeth. Jacob was speechless with the pig-head method, but he knew he couldn't expect anything from this muscle-head pig, so he could only sigh helplessly and said, "Just throw him inside the glass cell and release that blue liquid." Pig-head instantly complied. Jacob stood up from his chair with a heavy expression on his bony face. He never thought his first interaction with Decker would cause such a result. He again reevaluated his view of this world and Decker. Nevertheless, he still got what he wanted though. Even though it was only written information, not Decker's entire knowledge, it was still enough for Jacob to start somewhere. He started knocking around the room walls to find any hidden compartment, as he was familiar with this kind of compartment. He had many of them all over the world in his past life. After knocking around for some time, he breathed heavily since his health wasn't his strong aspect right now, but he still didn't stop looking. He finally knocked on the staircase, and when he was knocking below the staircase, the sound of something hollow rang in the room.